Hello and welcome back to Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and we've got another wonderful sew along for you guys today. In today's sew along, we will be sewing the Cashmerette Wayland dress. This is a Cashmerette collection pattern, meaning you can grab it and buy it at any time. And what's even better is that the Wayland mixes and matches with the entire Cashmerette Upton line. So whether you're wanting to sew the Upton dress expansion, it comes with many different skirts, a sleeved bodice, a sleeveless bodice, many sleeves. That is also a collection pattern. And these also mix and match with the Ellington dress, which is also a collection pattern, meaning you can get it at any time, as well as the Mansfield dress, which is a club pattern, and the Gilmore skirt, which is also a club pattern. All of these can mix and match bodices to skirts. And again, if you're using one of the bodices with sleeves from the Upton, you can do that. I can't even begin to think of how many woven dress options that you're gonna have with these patterns. The Wayland specifically, though, has two separate views. So the Wayland is a dress that is fit and flare. It features a kind of a narrow strap, a V-necked bodice, shirring in the back for both views, which gives a wonderful, comfortable fit across the back. It has a straighter skirt with pleats in the front, darts in the back with pockets that makes it really, really nice. View A is the dress that has the half-inch narrower straps. It features a zipper up the back if that is your preference, and it's the midi length that features the kick pleat in the back as well. View B is a just pull over your head dress, so it does not have that zipper in the back. It has a wider strap at 1 inch and finishes right above the knee. Obviously, you can mix and match any of these little elements if you would like. There is also an option for adding boning into the bodice if you are wanting something a little bit more structured, or maybe you're making a little bit more of an evening gown with this pattern. For our fabrics, the Wayfield does call for medium weight woven fabrics. So these can be linens, they can be cotton poplins, chambrays. Something with a little bit of body is nice just to show off those pleats and the pockets on the skirt. However, you could also go more evening with this and do something like a 4-ply crepe or even a satin if you're wanting something a little fancier. For the bodice lining, you do want a lightweight woven, such as a cotton lawn, cotton voile, rayon batiste. Any of these would be absolutely appropriate. But for the back lining that lines the shirred panel, you are going to want a two-way stretch knit that is between 20 to 50% stretch on that. It's a very small piece of needed for that pattern piece, so you can absolutely use a scrap from your bin, which is what I've done on both of the dresses that I have created here. I have made both views and I'm walking you through both views in this sew along. We have a tutorial for how to do the shirring, so there's no need to worry about that. I am showing you how to add the boning if that's something you would like to do, as well as all of the sewn steps included. This pattern is meant for an adventurous beginner, or an advanced beginner. So if you're someone that has a few sewing skills under your belt, this could be a really fun one to try, especially if you've never done any kind of shirring before. It is a lovely technique, and while it takes a little bit of extra time, it can add a fun little detail as well as comfort to the garment. All right, let's head over to the cutting table and we're going to go through not only our pattern pieces that we're going to need depending on the view you're making, but also our other supplies that we're going to need as well. Okay, so let's go through all of our pieces, what we need to have interfaced, and then all the other supplies that we're going to need for this project as well. As a reminder, I am making both view A and view B for you guys. So view A is the longer skirt with the vent, and it has the zipper in the back and the narrower straps. View B is the shorter skirt with the no zipper in the back. It's just the all-in-one back and the wider straps. So we'll be doing both versions in this sew along. For version A, I am using just a cotton poplin and for the regular, and I'm also using a cotton lawn for the lining, and then I'm using a cotton rib, like a real sturdy cotton rib for the knit. And then I'm using a cotton chambray for the view B with a cotton lawn lining, and then a cotton jersey for the knit lining. So let's go through our pieces that we need. So first we need piece 1, and this will be piece 1 A, B, or C, depending on which cup sizes you are using. I am using the GH cup sizes, so I've got 1C here. But this is the center front bodice, and you are going to cut 1 on the fold out of main fabric and 1 on the fold out of your lining. Make sure you notch or mark all of those notches. I also like to mark the center front at the top and bottom just with a little notch on those pieces as well. I also do that on the skirt, but just at the top. Helps when we're matching things up later. You then have piece 2, which is our side front bodice, and we have got, again, 2 A, B, or C, depending on which cup size you're using. This is 2C because I'm using the GH cup. You're going to have 2 of these cut out of your fabric and 2 of these cut out of your lining. Piece 3 is our side back bodice, and you're going to have 2 of these cut out of fabric and 2 of these cut out of lining. Mark those notches. Next is piece 4. Now this is determining which view you are making. So again, we are making, for this one, this is view A. So view A, you're going to be using piece 4A, which is our center back bodice, and this is the one with the zipper. So on this one, you are going to need to cut 2 out of your main fabric. So if you're making the version with the zipper, you need 4A, and we're going to cut 2 out of main fabric there. Also, if you're doing view A that has the zipper, you're going to need piece 5A, which is our center back bodice lining piece, and this is for the zipper. And we're going to cut 2 of these out of our knit fabric. And so again, this is just a real, it's cotton rib actually. 2 of these, it's a really stable knit. As a reminder, our knit fabric that we need for our lining needs to have at least 20 to 50% stretch going across, two-way stretch. So we want at least 20% stretch. Ideally no more than 50%, just so it doesn't get really hard when we're sewing our zipper in. If you're using the zipper, you have a little bit more leeway if you're not using the version with the zipper. But yeah, light to mid-weight knit fabric with 20 to 50% stretch there in that knit. And then if you're doing the narrow straps, which is what we're using for view A, you're going to need piece 6A, which is our narrow strap, and we are going to cut 2 of these out of our main fabric. Then you're going to need 1 of piece 7, which is our skirt front here. And we're cutting this at the view A length, which is the longer, the midi length. Cut here for the midi length, which we've done on this one. Make sure you've marked where your pleats are up here at the top. Mark your notches, and also here at the side for that pocket piece. You're going to need 2 of piece 8, which is our upper pocket piece, 2 of these out of the main fabric. Then you're going to need 2 of piece 9, which is our lower pocket piece, cutting 2 of these out of the main fabric. And then 2 of piece 10, which is our back skirt. And again, we are cutting this at the midi length version, and you're going to cut the vent in this one. Make sure we've marked that circle there on the wrong side of our fabric, and then again we want to mark our notches, and then our dart is going to get marked there for that back piece as well. So we're going to need 2 of these. Okay, next we're going to go over the pieces that we need for view B. All right, if you're doing view B, which is the shorter length with the wider strap and no zipper in the back, then you are going to need piece 1, which is our center front bodice. We're going to need, and this is 1 A, B, or C, depending on the cup size you're making. I'm doing a GH cup, so I've got 1C here. But we're going to need 2 of these cut out on the fold, and we've got 1 out of the main fabric and 1 out of the lining. Next, we have got piece 2, and again, this will be 2 A, B, or C, depending on what cup size you're making. We need 2 of these cut out of main fabric and 2 of these cut out of the lining. And again, I've got a cotton chambray fabric for the main fabric and a cotton lawn for my lining on this version. Piece 3, which is our side back bodice. We are going to need 2 of these cut out of main and 2 cut out of that lining fabric. Piece 4, now this is piece 4B because we're doing view B. This is the center back bodice piece with no zipper. So if you're not using a zipper, then you're going to use this 4B piece. And you're going to need 1 of these cut out on the fold. And again, I mark center, that fold, I mark with a little clip into that fold at top and bottom. This gets cut out of main fabric, 1 on the fold. Also, if you are doing view B, so you've got the back that doesn't have a zipper, you're going to use piece 5B, which is our center back bodice lining for no zipper. This gets cut out of the knit fabric. So this is my knit fabric here. Again, I've marked the on the fold at top and bottom, as well as my notches, and 1 of those out of the knit. Again, if you're making view B, you're going to use piece 6B, which is our wide strap. So we've got a narrow strap and a wide strap for this pattern. 6B is our wide strap. We're going to cut 2 out of fabric, and then we're going to cut 1 out of interfacing. And what I've done is we've cut 2 out of fabric here, and we've cut 1 out of interfacing. I've cut that interfacing in half from top to bottom and then fused it on half of each of the pieces. So that's why it's asking you to cut out 2 of fabric and 1 out of interfacing. All right, next is piece 7, which is our front skirt piece. And for view B, we are cutting this at the knee length version here. And we are cutting 1 of these out on the fold, and we are marking our pleats here, as well as all of our notches and everything as well. Then we have got piece 8 here, which is our upper pocket piece, and we've got 2 of these cut out of our main fabric. Piece 9 is our lower pocket piece, and we've got 2 of these cut out of our fabric, main fabric. And then finally, we have got our back skirt piece, which is piece 10, and we have cut, let me get this under the camera here. We have cut this one at the knee length, and this gets cut in from our, we don't have a vent on this one. So it gets cut in here at these lines. So it looks very much just like a rectangle. 2 of these out of our main fabric, but I've marked my darts and all of my notches and that sort of thing as well. So that is all of our pattern pieces that we need, depending on which view that you are making. Other notions that we are going to need a needle, obviously, and I'm using a Schmetz Microtex size 12 needle for both versions. I'm using regular Gutermann Sew All thread or the Gutermann Mara 100, same thing. So we're going to be using that. We are also going to need to be using some shirring elastic. So this looks like an elastic thread. This is a spool that hasn't been started yet, but it's like a thicker thread. This, I'll be showing you how to do the shirring. This gets put into the bobbin only when we're doing the shirring. So we have regular thread in the top thread, but I will show you how to wind the bobbin. We do that by hand when it comes to using the elastic thread, but you're going to need the elastic thread, and according to the pattern, you're only going to need 1 standard spool of this in order to complete the shirring that is needed for this project. We are also going to need a 1/4 inch wide elastic. You just need half a yard. I have way more than half a yard here, but we do need 1/4 inch wide elastic. Got a lot there. If you are doing view A and you are putting a zipper in, you are going to need 1 14-inch invisible zipper. So here is a 14-inch invisible zipper that I have got here. And then also, obviously the interfacing, if you are doing anything with the wider straps, and we'll interface a little bit the zippered back of the zippered edge as well, if you're doing the zippered version. But then we also have the option for boning. This is the boning I'll be using. This is the polyester Ridgeline boning. It is just, you can sew through it, but it's just a thin plastic. It's 1/4 inch wide. And then I also am going to be using the end caps, the plastic boning end caps, which are for the 1/4 inch wide. You can also file your ends of your boning. You can melt them with a lighter in order. We just don't want them sharp and pokey, so that it doesn't poke through the guts of the bodice when we get to that point. Again, this is an optional step. You do not have to put boning in the bodice if you don't want to, but I will be putting boning into both bodices that I am making, and or at least one that I'll be demonstrating, and I will be showing you exactly how to do that if that's something that you would like to do. In addition, we are going to need a tailor's ham or a rolled up towel. We will need a zipper foot. You can use an invisible zipper foot, but if you don't have an invisible zipper foot, you can also use just a regular zipper foot if you are putting in the zipper. And we'll need a tube turner or something to turn our straps. You can also use a safety pin for that as well. I'll show you how to use it using a tube turner. And again, if you're adding the boning, you're going to need some non-sewing scissors and possibly a lighter or a file if you're not going to use the boning end caps. And again, as with everything, I've got all of this, including where I've gotten all of these supplies, listed in the description box down below if you would like easy shopping. All right, let's head to the pressing station and get started sewing. Okay, so for both views, we're going to start working here on the bodice, and the instructions are the same for both views up until a certain point. And obviously, I'll let you know when those deviate, and there'll be separate instructions for each of the views. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do some stay stitching. So we need pieces 1, 2, and 3, and both of our lining and our main fabric. And we are basically going to be stay stitching in a few areas. We are going to stay stitch, so our seam allowances are 1/2 inch, so I'm going to be stay stitching at 3/8 of an inch. We want to do it within the seam allowance. And I'm going to be starting at basically at the shoulder, closest to the shoulder, going down to center front, shoulder, center front, shoulder, this little area here. We're going to stay stitch that kind of towards the side seam. And then we're going to do that on both main and lining. And then here at our armhole, we're going to start basically towards where it's at the shoulder, and we're going to sew here to the side seam. And then on our back pieces, closest to the side seam and sewing towards center back. Again, with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm doing that on all of my main pieces as well as my lining pieces. So I'm just going to go do that. I'm doing that with a 2.5 stitch length, we're stabilizing all those curves. So I'm going to go do that real quick, and then I'll meet you right back here. All right, now it's time to work on our bodices. This is for all views. Again, when we get to the point where we're deviating, I will let you know. We're going to need our piece 1, whether that's A, B, or C, our piece 2, A, B, or C, and then our piece 3. So that is center front, side front, and our side back bodice pieces. I'm setting piece 3, the side back bodice, aside for just a minute, and we're only working on the main fabric right now. We're not working on the lining, so you can set your lining pieces aside just for right now. So starting with pieces 1 and 2, and I've got my necklines, my neckline and the armhole edges stay stitched really nicely. And we are going to take one of our, again, we want to make sure that all of our notches are nicely, especially these notches that are going to match up here with here. And I am taking one of my side front pieces, maybe, and we're going to be placing this right sides together with the side of the box. Actually, I'm going to do this one. The picture shows this side, so we'll do the side. We'll do this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to match up that middle notch with my middle notch. And then my next notch. Now, remember, we are sewing convex curve to concave curve. We're going to have, there's going to be excess on this side front piece, but I will show you how we're going to deal with that in just a second. All right, then we can come up here, match raw edges, and then down to the waist and match those edges. Okay, so now that we have that pinned to that, we are going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew it, and we're going to do that together. All right, so we're going to be sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I am using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. I am sewing with my center front piece, the piece that got cut on the fold, up, and my side front piece down. I want that piece against the feed dogs. It's going to help ease in that excess. Our sewing lines match up, but our cutting lines don't, because it's a convex curve to concave curve. So I'm just going to get it started. We're at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're letting the feed dogs do any of the easing of the excess of this. But I am going to take my hand here and put it between the 2 layers, because I do want to make sure that my raw edges are lining up as we go. And I'm just going little bit by little bit, moving that hand in and out in between layers, making sure I'm not, especially once we get to the curve of the bust here. And again, I'm doing the GH cup, which has the most curve at the bust. Take out those pins when we get to them. All right. So we do want to check and make sure that our seam looks good. We have not caught any pinches or anything like that, and we haven't. So go ahead and do the same thing to the other side, and then I will meet you back at the pressing station and we'll press those seams. All right, once we've sewn that seam, we're not finishing any of these seams because this bodice does get lined, so we don't need to finish our seams unless you've just got really terribly fraying fabric, then you can totally do that. But we're going to press our seams as one towards center front. And we'll press it, and I'm doing that over the tailor's ham here. If you are having a hard time getting that curved seam to lie flat, you can clip into that seam allowance. The least amount of cutting you do into a seam allowance, the better. It just makes it a little bit more sturdy, but if you are having a hard time getting it to lay flat, you can totally do that. Then we're going to press it from the front. All right, once you have pressed those princess seams, it is now time to grab your piece 3, which is your side back piece. And we are going to be matching the side with just 1 notch to our side seam here. So we are going to pull that other one aside, right sides together. We are matching that notch and those side seams. And now we're going to sew this at the 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides. And then I'll meet you right back here for pressing. All right, once we have sewn that seam, we're going to press on both sides. We're going to press that seam towards side front. Again, we're not finishing that seam allowance because this will all be lined. Both sides. All right, and our bodice is partially done here, our outer bodice. We are now going to do, we're going to stop here, and I'm going to give a little tutorial on shirring before we actually get into our piece 4 for 4A or 4B, whichever one you're doing, and I'll show both. But we're going to be getting into a quick shirring tutorial before I actually show you how we're doing the shirring on those pieces. So let's go talk about shirring. All right, let's talk about shirring. So shirring is when we can get that stretch. when it's kind of gathered in, which is what our elastic bobbin thread is doing, and then giving it the whole back piece or bodice piece or whatever piece we are shirring, that smocked effect, but it's got stretch to it. You'll see it all over ready to wear. But we're going to be doing, this is a sample. This is not my pattern piece. This is just a little sample where we're going to be testing out shirring. It can be a little bit scary. It's nothing to be scary about. We're going to talk you through it here. It's pretty easy. So I have a 5x5, a 5-inch square piece of scrap fabric of my dress fabric. And if in doubt, just test a sample. Even if you've made this dress many times, go ahead and test a sample of the fabric you're using just to make sure everything is going to work the way you want it to work. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we need a bobbin for your machine, and that's what I've got here. And then we're going to want some of that elastic thread that I showed you. It's very elastic. And we're going to be hand winding the bobbin. So what I'm going to be doing is sticking this up through the hole of my bobbin, just like if it were winding it on a machine. And you want to make sure that your thread is going the correct way. So this is a Bernina bobbin, and this is the bottom side of the bobbin and the top side. Not all machines have a bottom and top side to their bobbin, so it may not matter. You can just, put it in the way you want. But if in doubt, stick a bobbin onto your bobbin winder on your machine and just notice how it winds the bobbin. Mine is going this way around the bobbin. So I am just going to start, I'm going to hold on to this top piece here, and so that I don't pull it through. And I am just winding my bobbin with my hand. Now, we don't want to pull it tight, but I don't want it to be baggy, which is seems kind of like counterintuitive. And this isn't going to wind as nicely as as it would on your machine, but your machine's going to pull too much and pull too much of the stretch out when it's winding it, when the bobbin winder is working. So we're just doing this by hand, trying not to let your spool roll away from you. And I am, again, giving it a little bit of tension, but I'm not stretching it too terribly hard. And we are only going to fill this about 3/4 of the way full. This is also a jumbo or a giant bobbin. I can't remember what they call it, a jumbo or a giant bobbin. The pattern does estimate you'll probably need about 2 bobbins worth in order to get through this part of the project. So you can go ahead and hand wind 2 bobbins if you want to do that ahead of time. And I'm trying to wind it as neatly as possible. All right, and that's probably getting about 3/4 of the way full. So I can stop there and get some scissors to cut that. All right, so let's go over, I'm going to load this into the bobbin of my machine, and we're going to practice on our little scrap piece. Now you can notice that I've drawn, hopefully you can see that, I've drawn some lines with a friction pin. That's what I'm going to be sewing along. We've hand wound our bobbin. We're going to thread the machine again with regular thread in the top. We'll talk about that in a minute, and then put this hand wound bobbin into the bobbin. And yeah, let's just go over there, and we're going to talk about what we're going to do, but we're just practicing on this scrap piece first. So let's go over to the machine and get this done. All right, so I have a bobbin case that my bobbin case actually comes out, and then it gets put back into the machine. If you have a drop-down bobbin, this will not look the same. Your bobbin case does not come out, but I am going to just go ahead and pop it in, and I'm threading it just like I would with regular thread. So that is all nice and neat in my bobbin case. I can pull that. It's working. I mean, it's stretching when it pulls, but that's what we want. So I'm going to put it back into my machine here. Again, threading it just as if I had regular thread in the bobbin. I am going to pull up. Well, I'm first going to turn off my back stitch function that I currently have turned on, and that also cuts my threads at the end of my sewing. I don't want either of those for right now. I'm taking my stitch length up to a 4mm length. It's still a straight stitch. So up to a 4mm length. I am going to pull my bobbin thread up. Sometimes this can be difficult. Come on. I can see it. There she is. Okay, so I've got that bobbin thread. I'm going to pull a little extra up, just like so. Okay, so I've got both my threads pulled up to the top, and now we're going to just sew a test, basically, to make sure that we're good with everything before we actually sew on our pattern piece. So I'm just starting at one edge, and I am going to sew with the right side of my face spacing up, and I'm gonna, let's see, making sure that I'm gonna backstitch at the beginning and the end of each line, but we are gonna cut it at the end, beginning and ending of each line. So I'm going to, and again, I turned off the automatic, so I'm just going to sew like 2, and then a couple back. And I'm holding on to my threads here at the back until I get started. And then once I get to the other end, I'm gonna backstitch just a couple of stitches. Then I'm gonna raise my presser foot up, and I'm gonna pull a large amount out because I don't want, number one, I don't want my thread sucking into my project, and I also don't want it sucking back into the machine. I mean, if it sucks back into the machine, it's not the end of the world. Also helps to have scissors nearby. Not the end of the world, it's just a real pain. So if you can keep it from sucking back into either thing, that is preferable. And there we have our first row. And it's going to gather the more we go. So now, and don't worry about all your really long tails. We will take care of that later. So now I'm going to go to my second line. And I'm going to do a couple stitches forward, couple stitches back. And as I'm sewing this next line, I'm going to kind of stretch that work. Get to the end, back stitch a couple, and then pull that work way out. All right, so we're going to do this. And there we have, there's our front. It's going to get stretchier as we go. And then there's our back. That's what it's going to look like. And I am very happy with that tension and what that's looking like. So let's do just a couple more lines, just the way we have been doing it. And then we'll go back to the pressing station and we'll take a look at everything. And just reminders, we just want to make sure that we stretch the work as we go. Just keep stretching it to make it as flat as possible as we go. And you want to try and keep those long tails that we've got out of the way too, so that you're not, making a big mess like that, making a big mess on the back. All right, let's go back to the pressing station and take a look at this before we do our actual pieces. All right, so I'm using contrasting thread, so you can see the white. That's not the bobbin thread, that is the top thread, but I'm very happy with that tension. I'm getting some very good stretch. The final step in this, obviously we've got all of these little threads back here. I like to save those though till the very end, even after that piece has been sewn together on either side. I'm not going to mess with it on this sample piece, but our last step is going to be to steam it and watch that really suck in tight. The steam makes that elastic thread suck in even tighter and give us even more stretch. So that's kind of the final step in that. Troubleshooting. If you are noticing that your bobbin thread is being pulled to the top or vice versa, it doesn't look very balanced. Honestly, on the back, it kind of looks like that elastic thread just kind of floats along the back, and that's what you want. So it looks different than a regular line of stitching. But if you keep messing around with maybe your top tension, you can mess around with the tension of your bobbin case. On my other machine, I actually have a bobbin case that I have loosened a little bit that is specifically just for shirring. But sometimes those bobbins can be expensive. Sometimes bobbin cases, sorry, not bobbins, the bobbin case can be expensive. And so it may not be worth it if you don't do a lot of shirring to mess around with it. I didn't have to do anything to the bobbin on this one. So this is the same bobbin that I use with my regular thread. I didn't have to mess with the tension on that bobbin case at all. So make that a very last resort. But you can mess with the tension on that top thread and just keep playing around with it until you get your sample looks the way that you would like for it to look. Something to before we get into our actual pieces, you do want to make sure if you run out of bobbin thread halfway through a line, you will need to stop, pull out that line and start over again at the beginning. You cannot start and stop or you don't want to start and stop a line of stitching in the middle of the work. Very easy for that to pull out. So we want to do all of our back stitching. Everything needs to happen at those side seams because those will get sewn with another seam. Whether that's the zipper going in on this pattern or the seam getting sewn into that side back piece. So yeah, just to keep that as note, a little bit of troubleshooting. But that's it. It's actually very simple and a very satisfying little technique. All right, let's go to our actual pieces and do our shirring. Okay, now typically when I'm doing two separate views of a pattern, I would break this up and show you just view A, and then I would show you just view B. But I'm actually going to do this part of it. We will get to that point, but I'm actually going to show you this part of it simultaneously because this gets done the same way. So if you are making view A, which is our zippered back bodice, you are going to need piece 4A, and that is for view A, and there should be 2 of these cut out of main fabric. If you're doing view B, you need the center back bodice for no zipper, and that is piece 4B. For that view B. And what we're going to do on all these pieces is, depending on which view you're making, is we're going to mark in our shirring lines, which I've done here on this piece. This is for view B. We want to make our first line of stitching 1/2 inch from the top and our last line of stitching 1/2 inch from the bottom. All the other lines in between, we wanted to be 1/2 inch-ish apart. Make it work. Some of these are 5/8 inch apart, and I think this one is just less than 1/2 inch. So we just want them ish. You really aren't going to be able to tell once that shirring gets in. The reason we definitely want 1/2 inch at the top and bottom because those are seam allowances that get sewn to the skirt at the bottom or get sewn to the lining up there at the top. I have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines of stitching here on my piece by roughly giving myself 1/2 inch. And then we're going to do the same on our 4A pieces, which are 2 separate. Sorry, it's a little bit harder to see my lines because of the fabric. I didn't think that part of it through. But again, you can see I've got my lines here marked for my shirring on both panel pieces. So we'll be shirring 2 separate pieces for view A and 1 piece that got cut on the fold for view B. So that is just kind of the rule of thumb. Remember, I'm going to be back stitching at the each end of each line, and we'll go do this together. But if you are, you can also pull your thread to the back and tie them off if you want. That just seems very time consuming to me, and I'm not having any issues with just back stitching a couple stitches. So that's what I'm going to do. And again, if we run out of bobbin during any of the lines, we just need to stop, pull that line of stitching completely out, put the new bobbin of elastic thread in and start again at the beginning. And again, we are starting and stopping each of these lines of stitching. And this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, I got 13 on the view A piece. So again, it's just kind of whatever you can wedge in there. I may just still stick with 12. Okay, so there we go. Let's go over to the machine and let's sew. Now that we know how to shirr, let's go sew our lines of shirring for whichever view you're doing. All right, I'm starting with view A. So I've got 2 pieces here. Again, my thread is pulled up to the bottom, both my bobbin and my top thread. I've got my machine set at a 4 millimeter stitch length. I'm going to be sewing just a couple of stitches onto this line and then back stitching, and then going forward, back stitching a couple stitches at each end. This is view A, so I've got 2 pieces to do on this one. So we're going to do a little time lapse. And as I go into subsequent lines, I am stretching the fabric flat so that we can make sure we're staying on our line. All right, so there is one piece of 4A. Obviously, we need to do the other side as well. But if you are doing view B, your piece does look a little different. One thing that you can also try is if you're getting any puckers, like you're having an issue sewing puckers into this, you can also, you don't have to go the same direction. Like here I'm starting from, let's see, left side when worn and going to the right side when worn every single time. You can switch it back and forth. You could start, go one direction, turn the piece, go back the other direction. It's, you can play around with it a little bit. But if you're doing the other piece, same thing, back stitch. We're just sewing one piece on this one instead of the 2 pieces for view A. Other than that, it is just the same. So you're going to want to go ahead and sew all of your lines of shirring, whether you're doing using 4A or doing two of 4A or 1 of 4B. Go ahead and sew all your lines of shirring, and I'll meet you back at the pressing station for the next step. Okay, once you have finished all of your shirring, you're going to have a piece B that looks like this, or you're going to have 2 piece A pieces that look something like this. Again, I'm leaving all of these really long threads for a little bit longer until we get those seams sewn, just because I don't want anything sucking back into the work. And once we've sewn a line of stitching over the ends of the stitching, it'll be nice and secured, so then we can trim. But the last thing we need to do to these pieces is give it a good steam. So it's going to suck, oh, look at it sucking that elastic thread right up. Just hover some steam, and you can do that on both sides. If you've got any areas where your thread's gotten tucked up, you can pull that out. So we can do that for all of our pieces. Ooh, yeah. So satisfying to watch those shrink up. Okay, now our piece 4, whether we're doing A or B, are ready to be sewn into our bodices. So now we'll be dividing up in between views A and B for a little bit. All right. If you are doing view A, I will see you next. If you're doing view B, you can go ahead and skip ahead to that part. All right, if you're doing view A, we need to attach our little sides. Now I've gone on the back of each piece and I'm just kind of pulling those strings away, making sure that nothing is, sometimes those tails wanted to get caught in the line of stitching. I think we're good. You have one side that has notches, and that is this side for me, and that is going to be the side that gets matched to our, if we're looking at our pattern piece. We have one side that doesn't have notches and one side that does. The side that has the notches is the side that is getting attached to center this side back bodice piece. So there are those. Again, we will trim all of this off. But I am just going to match right sides together, those notches. There's the other. Okay. Now we're going to go over to the machine and we're going to sew this. Okay, so I've put my machine back on 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and I have put regular thread back in my bobbin. So we are back to normal, all is good, and we are going to be sewing this seam with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm sewing with the shirred panel up, and I've turned my back stitch cutting function back on my machine. But I'm just going to kind of take these lines of thread and make sure they're all going away from the body here, because I want to make sure all of that gets caught in that line of stitching in that seam allowance, and it should. And then I'm back stitching at the top. Just like that. So that is done. Now we're not finishing off this seam because we are lining our bodice. So I'm not going to worry about that. But we are going to press these. So go ahead and sew your other side the same way, and then I'll meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, once we've got those side panels sewn in, after we've sewn that seam, I can go ahead and trim off all of these excess threads. I'm not cutting my seam allowance. I'm only cutting off those excess threads. Just kind of flush with the seam allowance. And then once we have done that and cleaned up our mess, we are going to press our seam towards the side back piece. I'm leaving all of these threads on this other side for now until we get that zipper sewn in. Okay, do that on the other side, and then you are ready for the next step. Okay, if you're making view B, we have our piece 4B here that is nice and shirred. Make sure it's turned the right way around. If you're looking at your notches here on the side, you've got your single notch that's higher up, and then your double notches down a little bit lower. We're going to match right sides together, that with our side back piece, and I'm just taking all those threads, we'll be trimming those here in just a second, all those threads, pushing them away from the piece, and I'm just going to match my notches and pin these in place. All right, let's go to the machine and let's sew this seam. All right, so again, just making sure that all those threads are pointing the correct way. We are sewing, I've got everything set back to the way it was before. 2.5 millimeter stitch length, I'm sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm back stitching at the top and bottom of each of my seams, but I'm sewing with my shirred panel up so that I can make sure that all of these rogue threads are all going away from the piece and not getting caught up weird. And I'm making sure that I'm also sewing over all those lines of shirring, the ends. All right, just like so. Let's take it back to the pressing station. Okay, now that we've sewn that seam, I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm just cleaning up those threads. I'm not cutting the seam allowance. I'm only cutting all of those shirred line threads. Again, this is going to get lined, so we're not worried about finishing this. But after we've done that, we can press this toward the side back piece. Then we're going to take the other side of that shirred panel, because this is the no zipper view, and we're going to take it over here to the other side and pin that in place. And I'm going to do the same thing by pushing all those threads out of the way and then matching my ends and also my notches. All right, and just like I did with the other side, I'm going to sew this at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'll meet you back here. All right, once we've sewn that other side, just like we did, we're just going to trim all of those thread tails off. And press that towards the other side back. And you may need to get your tailor's ham, seam roll, rolled up towel. All right, there we go. Our view B bodice has been sewn into a circle. All right, let's do the next step. All right, now it's time to work on our lining. And we're going to be both views, all views get sewn up this same way. Also, even if you are, it doesn't matter if you're putting boning in or not. These next few steps are all the same. All right, and I will tell you how to do the boning when we get to there. So what we need our lining, piece 1, and I've put washi tape on the back on the wrong side of my lining pieces. But we're going to put this together just like we did the main piece of our bodice. So we're going to take piece 1, and we're going to sew piece 2, which is our side front, and we're just going to mark those notches. Match those. All right. So we have pinned piece 2 to piece 1 here at this side, this princess seam, and I'm just going to sew this at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to do this on both sides, and then I'll meet you right back here. All right, once we have sewn that seam, just like with the outer bodice, we are going to press that seam allowance towards center front. I'm doing that over the ham. Okay, once we have pressed those seams, we are actually going to go in and we are now going to top stitch them. Now this is just to kind of keep everything nice and flat within the lining, but also if you do want to put some boning in, which I'm going to show you how to do, this is creating the channels for that boning. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we are going to top stitch this seam allowance in place 3/8 of an inch away from the line that you just sewed, the seam that you just sewed there on both sides. So what that's going to do is it's going to sew down the seam allowance on the back, but creating a channel there for that, so in keeping the seam allowances nice and flat, but also creating a channel for the boning that we're going to put in. So go ahead and do that. Top stitch on the center front piece, 3/8 of an inch away from that previous stitch line, and I'll meet you right back here. All right, once we have top stitched our seam allowances in place, it is time to sew piece 3 onto piece 2. So we're putting those right sides together, just like we did with our outer bodice pieces, matching those notches. Now I'm going to go sew this seam allowance at 1/2 inch on both sides, and I'll meet you back here. All right, once we've sewn these seams, we're going to press these towards piece 3, which is that side back piece. And now we're going to go and top stitch these in place. So at that 3/8 of an inch away from that seam line, I am going to top stitch that seam in place. All right, now we have those sides or those seams also nicely and top stitch. All right, now we're going to divide and depending on which view you're making, do the next step. All right, if you're making view A, you're going to have your piece 5A, which is the center back bodice lining, and that is, we've cut 2 out of the knit lining fabric. So I'm going to set this aside. And now we are going to match it right sides together. Sorry, let me put tape on the wrong side so you know what is wrong side and what is right side here. All right, tape means wrong side. All right, so we're just gonna line up and match our notches here. Now we are sewing a knit fabric to a woven fabric here. I am not changing my stitch or anything. I do have differential feed on my, not differential feed, sorry, dual feed on my sewing machine. So it feeds my top and bottom layers through evenly. If you do not have that, it might be really helpful to put a walking foot on for this step. And I am gonna sew with my knit side up, my woven against the feed dogs and my knit up. Okay. So I'm going to go sew these seam allowances at 1/2 inch with that straight 2.5 millimeter stitch length, and I'll be right back. Okay, once piece 5 is sewn onto that, we're just going to press that seam allowance towards piece 3, which is that side back bodice piece on both sides. And our lining is almost, well, our lining pretty much is done. It just needs to be installed now. All right, so that is the lining for view A with the zipper. All right, if you're making view B, you're going to need piece 5B, which is our center back bodice lining that is cut in the knit lining fabric, and our assembled top stitched bodice here. And we're going to be placing it, I put tape onto the wrong side here. We're going to be placing it right sides together with our sides, and we are matching those notches. I've got dual feed on my machine because we are sewing a knit to a woven. So that helps feed the fabric evenly top and bottom with those feed dogs. If you do not have that, you may find that this step benefits from using a walking foot just to make sure that your knit fabric is not stretching. Now I am going to sew with my knit fabric up, so I'm going to have my woven fabric against the feed dogs. But I am just going to sew this at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'll be right back. All right, once we've sewn that seam, we can press it towards piece 3, which is our side back piece. And then we're going to flip it back over. And we can put right sides together, the other side of piece 5 with the other piece 3. So making a big loop. Again, matching those notches. And just like the other side, I'm going to go sew this seam with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to sew with the knit fabric up and the woven against the feed dogs. Now we can press that seam towards the side back or piece 3 as well. just like so. All right, now our view B lining is all set and ready to go. So let's start working on our straps next. All right, now it's time to do our straps. So we have two strap options, 6A, which is our narrow strap, and 6B, which is our wide strap. For the wide, if you're doing the wide strap, again, you do need to make sure that you've cut one out of interfacing and interfaced half of, cut that interfacing in half lengthwise, and then interface half of each of your pieces. If you're making the narrow strap, you don't need to do any interfacing on those. Okay? So we're going to take, I'll demonstrate on one here. We're going to take, these get sewn the same way. We're going to take these, we're going to fold these right sides together. And we are going to go to the sewing machine. And we are going to sew across one short end. And then down the long side. So we're going to start here at 1/2 inch seam allowance, sew, pivot, sew all the way down one side, leaving this end open. And we're going to do that on both of those. So let's go do those together. All right, so depending, it doesn't matter which one you're doing, these get sewn the same. But we're going to start with our 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we're going to start at the fold. And then we are going to pivot. This is the narrow strap. One more stitch. There we go. And then sew down the long side. Like so. We'll trim it here in a second. Same thing if you're doing the wide strap. If you are doing the wide strap, I do like to sew with the interfacing up. Okay, let's go to the ironing table and let's trim these and get these turned right side out. Okay, once we have sewn our straps, we can do some trimming. We can trim our corner here, and then I'm going to cut the rest of my seam allowance in half. This is the wide one that has the interfacing on one side. And then we are going to turn this right side out. Now the way I like to do this, because we have one end sewn closed, is I'm going to pull apart my ends here. Take a pencil. This has not been sharpened or anything. It's just, I like to use the eraser end, but I'm pushing it into my body. You can't really tell. You can also push it against the table. And then just go like so. That way that you don't risk something going through the end of your stitching. Okay, and once that has been pulled through, we are going to give it a press. Like so. There's our wide strap. Our narrow strap, we are doing the same way. We are trimming our seam allowance in half. I think my pencil will still fit in this. All right, and just like the wide strap, the narrow strap's just a little tighter fit. Get those ends poked out and get that back out of there. And then press it flat. So you're going to do that to both your sides. And then I'll meet you back here to show you how we're putting it onto the bodices. Okay, we're going to grab our outer bodices here. And we're going to pin, this is, well, let's do view A first, because that makes sense in my brain. All right, here is view A. So this is the one that's going to get the zipper in the back. And we're doing the narrow straps. So this does not have interfacing in it. So I just want to make sure that that seam that I have sewn is facing away from center front. And I'm just centering this strap right in the middle of this section right here. So we've got the V-neck of piece 1, and then it's straight here at the top. We are centering it right in the middle there. I'm going to pop a pin in on each side. And we're going to baste this in place at 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to go to the machine and I'm just going to sew 3/8 of an inch across the top of that strap on this one. If you are doing view B, we still have those long threads on the shirring on that one. If we're doing view B, which is the one without zipper, we are going to take, when we're using wide straps, I'm going to take a look and I see that my interfacing is on, by looking inside that strap, is on this bottom side. And I want the interfacing against the body of my top, again with that seam pointing away from center front. And just like the other one, this one's obviously wider, but I am pinning it centered right in that same spot. And just like the other side, I am going to sew that at baste it basically, but you can just use a regular stitch length, sew that at 3/8 of an inch across the top. So let's go do that. All right, so now we've got our straps basted into place on the front of our bodices, which is what we want on both views, the thick straps as well as the thin straps. I guess I should have said, we sewed with the raw edge of these straps to this point. Our finished edge of our straps are down here away from that spot. That's going to get sewn into the back. So, all right, we can set these aside and we are going to start working on our skirts. All right, we're going to start working on our skirts, and this, so far, this is the same for both views, but we need our piece 7, which is our front skirt piece. So that is what we're working with here. And again, these next few steps are the same for, doesn't matter which skirt you're making. So if we're looking though at our pattern piece, we have got a pleat and then a notch, and then a pleat and then a notch. We're folding the pleat to the notch, the pleat to the notch, and we're taking it the pleat to the notch, the pleat to the notch. And then on the other side, we're folding it away from center front, basically. So I will demonstrate. And I have marked this with clips. But basically, I am going pleat to the notch. And I'm going to pop a pin in. And then pleat to the notch. So I'm taking my pleats towards my pockets. And then on the other side, so here's center front, on the other side I'm going to do the same thing, going towards the other pocket. All right, I'm going to go to the machine, and I'm going to baste these pleats in place just at 3/8 of an inch across the top to keep them in place so that we can then press them. All right, once we've basted those in place, just sewn across the top there at 3/8 of an inch, I can now just press them down, just 3 or 4 inches from the top. That's probably more than I needed to press, just to keep them nice and crisp. That's probably good. All right. Now our skirt pleats are sewn. Now it's time to work on our pockets. All right, now we're going to sew those pockets. So we need piece 8, which is our upper pocket piece. This is the one that has the slant cut into it. And we are going to take our skirt front. And we are going to pin this pocket piece right sides together with this pocket opening on the top of our skirt. And that should match real nice and neat. And it does. Okay, now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to sew this at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, if we're looking at the pattern piece here, it makes it a little bit easier. You see where the pattern, it comes up and then it kind of turns a corner and goes down. We are sewing where this corner turns. We are sewing straight and then straight off. So we are not turning the corner here. We are just sewing straight along this straight pocket edge. So let's go do that. All right, we are sewing at that 1/2 inch. And now we are actually going to finish this seam allowance. Now this is the first seam allowance we've had to finish so far because our bodice has been lined. So you can do a few things. You can sew another line of stitching about 1/8 inch away from this line of stitching in the seam allowance and then cut close to that. You can zigzag this seam allowance. You can use a faux overlock stitch on this seam allowance, or you can use a serger. I'll be using a serger, it's just my preference. But go ahead and finish that seam, this straight edge seam allowance, and then I'll meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, once we've sewn that pocket piece to the side and finished off that seam allowance, we can open that pocket piece out and press it to where that seam allowance is going towards the pocket. So the seam allowance is going towards the pocket. And now we're going to go understitch, which what that means is that I'm going to top stitch about 1/8 inch away from the seam line on the pocket piece, sewing the seam allowance of the pocket skirt front to the pocket piece. So I'm going to go do that and I'll be right back. All right, once we've got those pockets understitched, we're going to turn the skirt to the wrong side here, and we're going to press these towards the wrong side, and that understitching should help that pocket piece, the right side of the skirt, kind of roll to the inside, which is what we want. Just like that. The same on the other side. All right, the next step is that, we'll just work on this side. We want to get piece 9, which is our lower pocket, and we have cut 2 of those, so we need those pieces. And I am going to take and put the right side together on top of my lower pocket piece. So these are right sides together, and I'm matching up this lower edge here, kind of starting at the side seam. I'm not pinning through to the body of the skirt. I'm just pinning these 2 pocket pieces together. Matching my raw edges. All right, now we're going to go to the machine together, and we're going to start here at this side, and we're just sewing the pocket pieces together, and we're going to sew it 1/2 inch all the way around and all the way up. Okay, so let's go to the machine and do that. All right, so we're going to sew these pocket pieces together, and again, we are only working on, we're not sewing anything to the front of the skirt. This is just the pocket pieces. And I am sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, starting at the side seam, and we're just following around the curve of the pocket. Okay, once you have sewn that seam, you're going to finish that seam, however you're finishing your seams. So I'm going to do that and then do the same thing to the other side of the other pocket, and I'll meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, so now we've got these pockets. They're just kind of flapping around there. But we want to baste these in place now. So if we put everything the way it's going to be when worn, so the under pocket is folded down, there's that top pocket. We've got just a little bit over here into the side seam, but we're going to be doing some basting. Now, we can't exactly get this completely flat because we do have those pleats that are under there, and I don't want to crush those. But there is a notch at the top of the pocket that matches up with the folded edge of the under pocket there. All right, so now, I'll do the other side as well, just a second. But now we are going to go over to the sewing machine, and we are going to baste this, sewing through all layers. We're going to baste at 3/8 of an inch here on the side, and then 3/8 of an inch here at the top of the pocket to get that pocket all nice and basted in place. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll be right back. All right, so once we've got those pockets basted in place at the top and at the side seam, we can, and here it is from the back, nice flat pocket pieces. We can set this aside because we are now going to go work on the back of the skirt. All right, we're going to set our fronts aside for just a little bit, and we're going to work on our back pieces now. So this is for both views. I've got view B right here, but this is the same. This next couple steps are the same for view A and view B. All right, we're going to do is sew our darts. So make sure that you've got those marked, and we want, and this is piece 10, our back skirt piece. You should have 2 of those. And on the wrong side, I have marked, you may not be able to see it, but the end of my dart, and then I've clipped into the top of the dart. Oh, no, I haven't. I'm going to clip in to the top of the dart so that we know where our dart is. And then we are going to sew it, and I will show you where to do that. All right, so we are going to flip our pieces over so that our wrong side is up. And we're going to fold our dart, and we're going to put our 2 dart legs together. So those 2 clips I just clipped in there. And I'm going to pop a pin in. And then down here at my end of my dart, we're going to pop a pin in there. So those darts right sides together, and we're going to sew from our notches here down to our point, and I'm going to show you how I do that without drawing in the dart legs. You could totally draw in your dart legs if you wanted to, if that makes it easier for you to sew the dart, but I'm going to show you a little trick on how I like to sew darts. So let's go over to the machine and do that. All right, so we're over here at the sewing machine, and I'm going to take my top thread here, and I'm going to pull a real long piece out. And then we are going to start right at that clips, the ends of our dart leg. And I'm just going to sew a couple of stitches here. And then when it starts going forward, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to take that thread that we pulled out real long, and I'm just going to take it from that point down to my pin, which is right here. And we're going to use that as our line that we're following for our dart. And when we get to the dart point, which is right there on the fold, I'm going to pick it up, rotate it, and I'm going to sew back into the body of the dart a little bit right along that fold line, about, 3/4 of an inch or so, and then back stitch within the dart bulk. And that gives you a really nice end of your dart. And then you can, that long piece of thread, you can cut that out. But this is what that end of that dart looks like. Okay, do that to the other side and I'll meet you back at the pressing station for pressing. All right, so once we've got that dart sewn, we can press it flat and then we can take our ham and we want to press it towards center back. Which is the side with the notch that's up higher. So and you can press that on the front and the back. All right, so do that to both sides and then I'll meet you back here to attach them to our fronts. All right, so we're going to bring our skirt front over here and we're going to sew our skirt backs to our skirt front at our side seams. So I've got one side seam here and we are just going to grab one piece and matching our notches. Especially with this view B, it's easier to tell. It's hard to tell what's center back and what's side back because there's not that bent. So you really got to watch those notches. All right, and again, this is the same for both views, this step. All right, I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to sew this side seam at 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to finish it with the way that I'm finishing off my seam allowances, which for me, I am using a serger. But again, you can, however you're finishing off your seam allowances is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on this side seam and the other one as well. And then I'll meet you back here. Okay, once that side seam has been sewn and then finished, it is time to do some pressing. There's the front of the skirt. And we are going to take our ham, seam roll, rolled up towel, whatever you are using, and we're going to press that seam towards that back. Now our center back seam is still open on both views. That is fine. We will get to that in a minute. Okay, once you have done that, you're going to do the same thing on the other side. And then I will meet you back here. We will be dividing up for view A and view B. Okay, it is time to work with view A, which is our view that has the zipper in the back. So the first thing we're going to do, we've got our skirt piece that has been sewn together except for center back. Center back is still open. And then we've got our bodice, which also is all put together except it is still open because we don't have that zipper in the back yet. We're going to be sewing the bodice to the skirt. So I am first going to pin center front of the skirt to center front of the bodice. And I would just like to pat myself on the back because I'm working with a grid here and I did really well. I think there's not going to be complete matching up, but at least it's center front because we've got princess seams we're dealing with and pleats and darts. They're going to mess up the grid work, but I'm feeling pretty good about things. All right, we are going to be matching. Our princess seam is going to match our first pleat. And then our side back, that seam side back that got sewn to our shirred panel matches up with the dart. And the dart goes one way and the shirred panel seam goes the other. And we're gonna come back here for this in just a second. Okay. All right, so with our sheared panel, because it's all gathered, remember, and it will, once we have sewn it, it will kind of gather in the back of the skirt too, which is fine, that's what we want. But we are gonna have to stretch this sheared piece in order to fit the top of the skirt. And we'll sew this together, but we're gonna sew right along that bottom sheared line. Remember, because we made that line 1/2 of an inch up, which is our seam allowance. Sorry, focus. So you can pop in more, but we're basically just going to stretch that sheared panel to where, and it will fit the back part of the skirt there. So I'm just going to pop a pin in here at the end, and then we will stretch that as we're sewing. All right. Okay, let's go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew this seam at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so we still haven't cleaned up all of our extra threads here at the edge of our sheared piece where that zipper is going to go. But I just want to make sure that my raw edges just here at this waist seam allowance are matching. And I'm sewing right along that bottom, which should be at 1/2 of an inch, that bottom line of shirring with my 2.5 millimeter stitch length. And now I'm just gonna stretch it. So again, that will gather that skirt piece, but that's fine. All right, now we're just gonna sew the rest of the way around the waist until we get to the other side, and then we will pull that shirring to fit again. Okay, once we've sewn that seam, let's go back to the pressing station and do the next step. All right, once we've sewn that seam, we are going to, oh, got a lot of those. We need to get rid of these extra threads. They are just getting caught in everything, which we will in this next step. Okay, we are going to now press that seam allowance up towards the bodice. And see, we can see that shirred panel is already pulling in the back part of that skirt, which is what we want to happen. And it will more once we've hit it with some steam. But we're pressing that seam allowance up towards the bodice. All right, once we have pressed that seam allowance up, we are going to finish off the back seam allowances. So I am going to be using a serger. Again, you can use your zigzag stitch, a faux overlock. But I'm going to finish off this edge, very carefully finish off the top of my vent, and then I'm going to use my serger to finish all the way up to the top of the dress. Now, I am going to trim off, I'm going to sew with this back of this sheared panel up, and I am going to trim off my threads as I go, but you want to be very careful that you're not trimming, if you're using a serger, that you're not trimming off any excess seam allowance. Now, if you were using a zigzag stitch or faux overlock or something like that, I would go ahead and you could trim all of these excess threads here now. Before you do that. So if you're not using something that like a serger that has that thread blade or that blade, go ahead and trim those flush. Again, not trimming any of your seam allowance. So go ahead, finish off both sides of that back seam allowance and grab a zipper, and I will meet you back here. All right, it is time to put the zipper in. So I've got my back seam all, or the seam allowance all finished. When I was serging, if you are using a serger, make sure that you're stretching this out as you go, because you don't want to accidentally serge together the gathered fabric and lose any of that stretch that's in there. But that serging does capture the your loose ends nicely. Anyway, that's all been finished. So let's set this aside for just a minute and take a look at our invisible zipper. I also have some wash away tape, or it's a double stick tape, Wonder Tape, called many things, all the same thing. It's 1/4 of an inch wide. We're going to be using it because I don't like to use pins when I am putting in an invisible or any zipper. I feel like it distorts the teeth a little bit, makes it harder to put in. All right, here's my invisible zipper. I am unzipping it, turning it over so my right side is down, and I've got my teeth that are rolling to the wrong side here, which is what we want for an invisible zipper. But when we're installing it, it really helps to have that ironed flat. So I've got a warm iron, not too hot. We don't want to melt those teeth. And I'm just ironing those teeth away from that edge. And that's going to just make sewing it in, being able to get really close to the teeth when you're sewing it in much easier. All right, just like so. Let's give this side another little. You don't want it too hot that you melt your coils, because this is a nylon zipper. Okay, so when you zip it up, it should want to kind of stand up completely on its own. That's what we want. That's what we're going for. All right, if we flip this back over to the right side, we're going to put some of this double stick tape, Wonder Tape, whatever you want to call it. It's got glue on one side, paper on the other. So I am just going to stick this right along the edge of that zipper tape, the whole length. But I'm going to leave that paper on for right now. All right. Store this stuff in a Ziploc bag, plastic Ziploc bag of some sort. Otherwise it dries out. All right. Gonna press that down really good. Okay, we're gonna take our dress. It really doesn't matter which side you do first. I'm gonna be putting it on this left side when worn first. That's just my preference, but again, you can do whatever you want. So I'm going to open that up. I'm gonna unzip my zipper. And when we're looking at our zipper here, this is what it's gonna, well, pan out. This is kind of how it'll be inserted when everything, because this is facing up. So we're gonna lay it out, and then we basically wanna put our zipper right sides together with our dress. So I am going to start peeling this paper off, and I am lining up. I'm actually, my tape is only 3/8 of an inch ish wide. So I am going to come in just a little bit from that raw edge, and I want to be a 1/2 of an inch. I want my zipper stop to be a 1/2 of an inch away from the top. This is a 1/2 of an inch. This is a 1/2 of an inch from the top of the tape to that zipper stop. And I am just going to very carefully stick this in place. And I'm just pulling that paper as I go. This side's the easy side because we're not trying to match anything up yet. Next side gets a little trickier. So our zipper and our dress are right sides together, and that means that our zipper teeth are going away from center back at the moment. All right. All right. So let's go over to the machine and we're going to sew this side down. All right, so I've put I'm putting an invisible zipper foot onto my machine. Visible zipper feet have these two grooves here that you feed those zipper teeth that we pressed away here at this last stage. It makes it so much easier. If you're going to be sewing a lot of invisible zippers, which that's my preferred zipper to put into things, I highly recommend one. They're not very expensive. You can get a generic one for pretty much any machine. So highly recommend. You can do this also with a zipper foot, which we'll be using when we put our lining in, but that allows you just to move your needle way over to the side. We just want to get as close to those teeth as possible without sewing onto the teeth. All right, so I'm putting this in. And what we are doing is we are basically going to put the teeth, this little notch, right into that first notch. And then when it sews, it can be a little hard to get over that stop, but not impossible. It sews right next to the teeth and not onto them. Okay, we're going to sew all the way down until we hit our stop where we can't go anymore. And that's where we backstitch or lock stitch. I have to pull it out of that. So now when we zip her up, and always zip it up to check, because the visible zippers can be so finicky. And if you sew even a little bit onto their teeth, they will refuse to zip up. But this is zipping up just fine, so I'm feeling really good about that side. All right, let's now go back to the machine, or to the pressing station, and we're gonna mark for our other side. Okay, so I've got my zipper sewn in on the one side. I have got a friction pin here because we want to mark a few things so that we're making, really I just want to make sure that the top of my dress is lining up and that also like my waist seam matches up, which is a horizontal seam going across the zipper. But I'm going to take this zipper and I'm going to turn it wrong side up again so that I can mark, and this again, this is a friction pin so it goes away with heat. But I want to mark right where that waist seam is. Now my zipper tape's right up here at the top, so that's kind of nice. And because I have a gridded pattern, if you want, I can do a little bit of, there's my stripe. I'm not as concerned with it up here. Maybe I'll just give myself one little reference, just like so, okay? Now we are going to pull around the other side of the dress. Turn this right side up. We're going to unzip it again. But now we are going to take our tape and we are going to turn it this way, upside down, okay? Now, what this means is that our pull down here at the bottom is going to look like twisted. It's going to look really twisted, and that's okay. That's what we want. So I'm going to peel off a larger chunk of this just so we can match up some points here. So number one is my waist seam. So I want to make sure that that is matched up. So I'm matching up that line with my waist seam here. And then that can match up with a couple of those points, those stripes. And we could do the rest. These are kind of squiggly stripes, so they don't necessarily match up perfectly across seams because they aren't like straight stripes. I was noticing that when I was doing my side seams. All right, so again, it's going to look real twisted down here at the bottom. That's okay. Well, I would like the pole to not be there. There we go. All right. Now we're going to go back to the machine and sew down the other side. All right, so I'm starting at the top again. So all of my dress is over here on the other side of me. And now I'm putting the zipper tape into the other notch that's there. Just getting it past that pole. And then that Wonder Tape really does make it easy to slide it on down. And then just like with the other side, when we hit that stop, that's where we're going to backstitch. All right, so now, even though this seems very twisted, it will twist around, and then we can practice sewing up that zipper. You can also base this in place if you don't want to sew it completely down quite yet, just to make sure that all of your seams are overlapping. Oh my gosh, I keep sewing up the dress. Okay, there we go. Oh, and I'm very happy with that. I'm very happy with the way my stripes and everything are going across. Look at that. And my waist seam looks really good. Okay, let's go back to the pressing station and do the next step. All right, so my zipper zips up really nice, and everything is looking good. So I'm going to turn this all inside out, because now we are pinning the rest of the seam together. And we have got a dot there on the pattern that I have marked right here. That is where we are going to be stopping. So I'm going to put a pin right there. And now a couple more pins up this seam. So we're going to start sewing just a little to the left, a little above and to the left of where we stopped sewing our zipper. Kind of fold that out of the way. And then we're going to sew all the way down and stop at that spot that we marked on the pattern. Okay. All right, let's go sew that now. Okay, I've got a regular zipper foot on. You can see there's the line that I stopped sewing my zipper in. I am starting just a little bit, I don't know, like a ½ inch or so above that and a little to the left of that. So I've got my zipper foot on. I've pushed my needle all the way to the right. Now you do have to be careful once we get down below a little bit. Matching up those raw edges. It's kind of hard because the zipper is in the way, but we do want to make sure we are hitting that ½ inch seam allowance. But remember, your needle is not in the 0 position, so you may not be lining up to the ½ inch on the one side. Just keep that in mind. You may want to measure over. I am eyeballing a little bit, but I do know that if I'm putting it at the 5/8 of an inch, it is going to be half, because I'm about 1/8 of an inch over from where I was. So all right, I'm going to sew all the way down until I get to that dot for the vent, and then actually going to back stitch. Really reinforce that there. just like so. Okay, let's go back to the pressing station. Okay, before we press this, I'm gonna clip from this little 90-degree angle here, from there to where we stopped stitching there in that kick pleat, to but not through. Okay, now we are gonna leave the vent alone for right now, but we are going to, let me get my seam roll, a little easier for this type of thing. Stick our seam roll, whatever you're using, rolled up towel, and the seam allowance above that, we are going to press open. We will deal with the kick pleat later. Then if you want, you can just kind of give your zipper a light press as well. And there goes all those lines I drew with that friction pen. Okay, there we go. Center back seam is sewn and our invisible zipper is in. I'm going to turn all of this right side out, and then I need you to go grab your lining because we are going to be inserting the lining into our dress. So I'll be right back. Okay, we have got our lining and we've got our dress. So I am going to unzip the back of my dress so I can open it out. And we are going to be pinning and sewing our lining right sides together. Remember, tape means wrong side. Right sides together. I'm going to start at center front here. And we are only sewing, we're not sewing down the zipper yet. Okay, once we've got everything pinned around to the top, we do want to make sure we are opening up that zipper. So I am opening up that edge. So my zipper teeth are again going towards, away from center back. So we can get all of that sewn in. Okay. Something to note, because there's the option for 2 different sizes of straps. If we're making the wider strap fills this out a little bit better, so you really are half inch, but we may have to go a little bit more than ½ inch on these 2 sides, just so we finish off this edge nicer. So if you want to take a friction pen or chalk or whatever you're using to mark, and mark just on either side of that strap, which is ½ inch. That way you're pivoting at a really nice spot that will close that up. All right, now we're gonna go to the machine and we're gonna start at one side and we're gonna sew all the way around to the other side to sew down that lining. So let's go do that. Okay, so we're just gonna start at one side. Again, we're not sewing our knit down to our zipper yet. That's gonna be another step, so don't worry about that. So we're just sewing along the top edge. But again, my zipper tape has been rolled out so that zipper teeth are pointing in towards the bodice and not towards center back. We are sewing at ½ inch seam. Oh, I need to change my foot. You want your regular foot back on, not your zipper foot. And you want your needle to go back into its normal spot. All right, now we can sew ½ inch seam allowance. And just go slow over this edge. I mean, your nylon zipper should be fine. You know, you shouldn't break a needle or worry about that, but just, again, just go slow. Also, your shirred panel, it will stretch. Don't stretch your lining, but your shirred panel will stretch to fit. And it will gather in this knit liner, just like it did at the bottom. That's fine. When I get up here, instead of staying with that 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, I'm taking a bigger seam allowance so that I can get right to that mark. And then I am going to take it back down to that 1/2 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, our lining has now been attached to our bodice. Let's go to the pressing station for the next step. Okay, now we've got this all sewn. We're going to need to cut 2 pieces of elastic. The chart in the pattern is going to tell you how long. For my size, I needed 5 3/8 inch, 2 of them, cut 2 pieces. We're going to sew that here in just a second. But before we do that, because we're going to do some understitching as well, at that point, leave this area alone with clipping, this area with our knit fabric. And honestly, this side back piece is probably fine too. But once we get to this area with the curve, we are going to start clipping about every 1/2 inch to but not through that line of stitching. And then we want to clip our, where our straps are, clip that off too. Then I'm going to clip down to that V. We really don't need to, that's a pretty straight seam. We really don't need to clip into that area. Okay. It's really that underarm curve we really want to hit. Okay, we're going to take our elastic and we're going back over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew our elastic in and then we're going to understitch our lining. So let's go do that. All right, so first we're going to sew our elastic in, and I am sewing with my lining side up here. And I've got my little piece of elastic, and I've put my machine on a zigzag stitch with a 3 width and 3 length. And I'm starting right here at the edge of my seam. Just going to get that started. Okay, and then I'm gonna just stretch it until it is equal. So it's overlapping this seam here, but till it's equal with the seam allowance there. And I am lining up the edge with my previous line of stitching and then just kind of stretching that elastic a little bit as I go. But I don't want the elastic to go past that previous, that stitch seam line. And then back stitch. So that it looks like this. And once we hit that with some steam, it's gonna really support that edge nicely. All right, do that to the other side and then I'll meet you right back here for understitching. Okay, so once we've got our elastic in on both sides, we're gonna take our lining and we're going to fold it away from the body of our garment, like so. And here we're understitching. So we are sewing the seam allowance to the lining or facing side. We are sewing about 1/8 of an inch away from that previous stitch line. Here in this first little bit, I'm using that same 3 width, 3 millimeter long stitch. And I'm just kind of carefully easing the body and the lining separate. And then once I'm past the knit point, I'm going to switch it back to a straight stitch. Whoops. And we can use a 3 length. And now we are going to sew understitch straight. We're not going to be able to get all the way into those, all the crevices. We're just going to go as far as we can. And then when we can't go any further, we'll break the line of stitching, back stitch, and then pick it back up at the neckline. And then when we get back to the knit, I'm going to switch back to my zigzag. Making sure that seam allowance is going the correct way. And there we have it. We are all nice and understitched. All right, let's go back to the pressing station for the next step. Okay, once we've got all of that understitched and all of that jazz, we're going to do a couple things. First, before we turn anything to the inside, the bottom edge of our lining, we can go ahead and press that up 1/2 inch and give it a press. And we're folding that and pressing it to the wrong side. All right, now we can kind of turn everything right side out real quick and just give it a good press all along that neck edge. Making sure that the shell, the body of the dress, rolls to the inside. So you can see that outside fabric kind of rolls to the inside. Okay, now we are going to secure our lining to our zipper. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the lining, we've pressed the neckline all nice, but we're going to take our lining and we're going to go back over to where our lining and the shell of our body are again right sides together. And we've got the understitched area up here. So it's going to want to pull that entire seam allowance around to the lining side. And that is great. That's what we want. Oops, sorry. So I am going to pop a pin in here. And then down here, you know, we folded that to the wrong side. We want to keep that folded up. Open up that zipper. And that should match the seam on the other side. All right, so we're going to do this on both sides of the zipper, and that's the only pins I'm going to put in there because we're going to sew with our knit fabric against the feed dog, so we're going. But I'm going to go ahead and pin this also on the other side, and then I'll meet you at the sewing machine. Okay, so like I mentioned, I'm going to sew with the knit against the feed dog so it doesn't get all bent out of shape. And I've got my zipper foot back on. And I'm running my zipper foot right along those teeth, which you can see my stitching line that's right there. I realize this is pulling away. We'll fix that in just a second. I've moved my needle. I want to be right to the right of that first line of stitching though, because I don't want to accidentally sew on my teeth. But now I'm just going to pull that. I want my lining secured, but I don't want to sew on my teeth. And again, that lining is folded up to the wrong side. Just like that. Okay, do the same on the other side. I'll meet you back at the pressing station. Okay, once we've got that secured, we can trim our tops a little bit, trim that seam allowance. I'm using crappy scissors because there's zipper tape and zipper teeth and all sorts of stuff up in there. And now we can turn things right side out. And there, just like that. Beautiful. Okay. Before we secure our lining to the inside of the bodice, now is the time to do boning if you want to put any boning in. So that's what we're going to go to next. You can absolutely skip that part and just skip ahead to the slip stitching the lining down, but I will see you at the next place. All right, if you're inserting boning, that is what we are doing here. I am using Rigeline boning, which is a polyester plastic boning here. It's clear. And I am finishing off my ends with the end cap, the plastic boning end caps that are also meant for 1/4 of an inch wide boning. You can absolutely use whatever you want. There are a few ways though. You do need to finish off the end of your boning, whether that is, it's kind of nice to just trim and cut with crappy scissors the edge. You just don't want to be stabbing yourself with the boning. If you just end it off like this, a metal file is really good to smooth out any sharp edges, or a lighter can do it, or a little Dremel tool can also do it, or you can just use these little end caps that finish it off really nice and easy, which is what I'll be doing. All right, I'm going to show you how to do this. And when you're using the plastic boning like this, it's you can mold it with your iron. These are only getting inserted into side seam, princess seam, side seam. So 4 seams only into the lining. And we created little channels when we top stitched those down, which makes it really easy. So we're going to take one of our finished edges. I've got my edge finished. I'm going to slide it. Well, I'm going to unfold first because we folded that and pressed it. Slide that in until I am all the way up to the top. Smooth that down. Then I'm going to mark where I'm ending so that I can pull this out. But I need this to be shorter than that because that was to the raw edge and it needs to be able to fold up. So I'm going to go about 1/2 of an inch shorter and cut it. And then kind of cut it off. I mean, I really don't need to do this since I'm using these little ends. Like so. So that's how I know how long I want to make it. Then I'm going to slide this back up inside of there. And then I am going to go to the machine with my zipper foot still on because I want to be able to run my zipper foot. And I'm going to sew really close to the end of this boning to keep it all nice and in place. So I'm just going to, with my zipper foot, my needle all the way to the left, I'm just going to sew the end of this casing closed. So let me go do that and I'll be right back. All right, so I've sewn the bottom there and now that boning is nice and in that spot. We've got some curvature here. When I've got all my boning in here, we can put this on top of a ham with some heat. Now this is the side seam, so we don't want that to be we want that to be pretty straight. But give it some heat so that it lies nice and flat, let it cool. We'll do that together. But go ahead and put your boning into all 4 of your seams and I'll meet you back here for some shaping. All right, once the boning is in all of the channels, we can just hit it with some warmth and it will straighten it out, which we do want it to do on those side seams. Just kind of hold it until it's cooled. And then on those princess seams where we actually want it to curl, we want it to cup, not curl. And I'm doing this from the right side. It's kind of getting all wonky because it doesn't want to, the lining's not fixed inside there yet. So my seams, bust seams aren't matching up. But we basically and again, this works really well with the plastic. It's not going to work with the steel, but it will work with the plastic. All right, so we're just going to do that on all of our seams, and then our boning is in, and now it's time for next steps. All right, so if you've put your boning in, you don't have to put boning in, but if you have, that is in, and now it is time to secure our bodice to the, our lining to the dress. So we've already folded our edge under to the wrong side, and I am just going to go through and I'm going to pin seam allowances. Now, this knit will need to get stretched a little bit in order for that one, not the knit, but the shirring underneath will need to be stretched just a little bit. But I just want this folded edge to just cover that line of stitching. Again, lining up all of my seams. And I'm going to pin this in place all the way around the body. Okay, once we have pinned all of that down, it is then, we're going to secure this by using a slip stitch, a hand sewn slip stitch, in order to secure this in place. Okay, so I've got a needle and thread. I'm using contrasting thread so you can see it. It's just, my thread's just through once. I've got a hand sewing needle. I've tied a knot at the end. And basically what we're doing for a slip stitch is I'm going to come in here and bury my tail or my knot. All right, then I'm just coming up, sliding my needle through the fold. It's a little hard on the knit fabric. This is not a ballpoint needle. And then I'm catching a bite right above below. Right above below, that made sense. Right above that stitching, like in the seam allowance. And then again, through that fold. I'm doing nice big stitches, especially through the knit and shirred area, because I do want that to be able to stretch and then gather it in. Okay, so we're just going to keep doing that all the way around the edge of the bodice, and then our lining is secured to the inside of our dress. Okay, last thing with this view A is to finish our kick pleat. Now, it's kind of all wonky up here. We're not worrying about that at the moment. First thing we need to do is finish off the bottom hem of your skirt. So I'm using a serger, but you can use the zigzag stitch, the faux overlock on your machine. However you're choosing to finish off your hem or seam, go ahead and do that. And now we're going to take our skirt, and this is the left side when worn. Here's my vent right here, left side when worn. And I'm going to fold this hem allowance up to the wrong side, the 1 inch hem allowance, which is right there. Okay, and now I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew this area right here. So let me go do that real quick. All right, I've sewn that. I can now trim that corner and turn it right side out. So that's going to fold up the bottom hem by 1 inch, and it's going to fold this edge of the vent to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. So now we can kind of press a little bit, the 1 inch. This is the hem right here. And then here's my vent right here. And it's pushing it the 1/2 inch to the wrong side. So I can give that a press. Now I'm going to go back to the machine, and I'm going to top stitch this in place 3/8 inch away from the fold. And I'm going to stop right at that 1 inch hem, because we're going to pick it up and do it around the rest of the skirt. So let me go do that real quick. I'm just going to start here at the top of the vent, 3/8 inch all the way down until I hit the top of that hem, and then I'm going to stop and backstitch. All right, so we've got that in place. On the other side of our vent, which is the right side when worn, we are going to take it, and we are going to fold it over, right sides together, 2 inches. Right there. And we are going to sew horizontally this time at the 1 inch. So this is my hem right here. We're going to sew 1 inch across the bottom of this vent. So let me do that. Okay, so we've done that. Now we can trim the corner off of that. Turn that right side out. And now that is making this vent piece. Want to turn inside and make the hem go up that 1 inch. Now before we finish hemming or pressing the rest of our hem up, now we are going to take our skirt, and our right side when worn is going to go over our left side when worn. So there's that top stitching that we've got. Make sure that everything is laying nice and flat. Okay, so when we're looking at this on the inside, all of that should be laying nice and neat on top of each other. And it is. And then from the right side, I'm going to make sure everything is lying nice and flat. And then I'm going to pop a pin. I can feel all that bulk there from those vent pieces, and all those vent pieces are going right across. Now we're going to go to the machine and we're going to sew from the seam over to the end of that vent, just horizontally right there across that top of that vent. We just want to make sure that our hems are all lining up, and it is. Everything is lying nice and flat as it should. So let me go and just sew across this real quick. All right, so this is what it looks like on the front. I've got that line of stitching right there. That's it on this. There's that underlap. And then on the back side, it is all sewn together. Okay, nice and flat. Okay, the last, well, not almost last step, is now we want to go around the rest of the hem of the skirt and press it up the 1 inch all the way around. So let me do that. All right, once we have pressed that hem, 1 inch hem up all the way around, I'm now going to go to the machine and I'm going to pick up where I left off here on this top stitching and top stitch this down 3/4 of an inch away from the folded edge. Alternatively, you could do a blind hem as well if you wanted to. Just do some hand stitches to do that blind hem, or do a blind hem foot on your machine. So let me go hem this in place and I'll be right back. All right, once you've got that top stitched, or blind hem stitched, however you want, all the way around. There we've started at where we stopped there at that 3/8 of an inch and went all the way around. And then here on the other side of the vent, we've just ended it like so. All right, the last step on this view A is just to do the straps. So you can continue on to that section, and then you've got a finished dress. All right, so for view B, once we have our side seams all done and pressed towards the back, we need to take our center back seam and get that sewn up. So I'm just putting center back seam here, right sides together, and I am matching that notch that's there. Popping a few pins in, and we are going to sew this center back seam at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, and then we want to finish that seam allowance however you are finishing your seam allowances. So let me go to the machine real quick and sew that seam allowance at 1/2 of an inch, and then I'm going to finish it, and then I'll meet you right back here. All right, once I've sewn that center back seam, I have finished off my seam allowances separately. A lot of times when we sew our seams, we finish off that seam allowance together. I have finished this off separately because the instructions want us to press this seam allowance open. Now we're not putting a vent. It would be very important if we were putting a zipper or a vent in the back, but we are not. But we are following the instructions for this view as well. All right. Once we have got that pressed open, go ahead and grab your finished bodice. We're going to turn this right side out again. Go ahead and grab your finished bodice, the shell, your outer bodice, and I will meet you back here. All right, so I've got my skirt right side out, and I've got my bodice here. I'm going to turn it inside out. Tuck those straps away for now. All right, we are going to slide our bodice over our skirt here so that we can match up our waist seams. Okay, so I am matching up the center of the front of the skirt with the center of the center front bodice piece. And I'm going to pop a pin in there. Our princess seams match up with that first pleat. On either side here. our side seams match. And then the princess, that seam in the back matches our darts. The seam that attaches that shirred panel to the side back. And then we've got a lot of, there we go, a lot of excess skirt because of that shirred panel. Now we're going to be sewing on the bottom line of shirring when we're sewing this together so that the shirring gathers up the back of the skirt as well. But I am just going to, I feel like maybe I clipped into the bottom. I might not have of this shirred panel. I don't think I did. I'm just going to put my shirred panel together here so I can determine center back, which is right there. That way I can match that up with the center back seam. And this is the only pen that I'm going to put in here because I'm going to stretch that shirred panel to fit when I'm sewing. And we'll do that together. Okay, all penned. Let's go to the sewing machine and sew this waist seam. Okay, so I'm starting at one of the side seams. Normally I would start like center back. I don't know why when I'm doing a seam all the way around, but I don't want to start in that shirred panel. So I'm going to start at one of the side seams, and then we're going to just sew with my 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Oh, you know what? I need to be, hold on. We want to sew with our shirred panel up. So I am going to turn all this. The reason that we want to sew with our shirred panel up is so that, well, I'll show you, so that we can make sure that we are sewing right along that line of elastic. Let's try this again. So my shirred panel, the shirring is up. So I can see what I'm doing. All right, remember we only put in pins at the seam and then at center back. Okay, so when we did our shirring, this bottom line is just a 1/2 inch away from the bottom, which is our seam allowance. So we're going to be sewing, maybe not right on top of it, but right next to that line of shirring. And that should equal our 1/2 inch seam allowance, and it does. And I'm just stretching that shirring, that shirred panel, as I go, and when I hit the midpoint right there where I put that pin, I'll stretch the other side. And then we're just doing the 1/2 inch the rest of the way around. All right, let's take this over to the pressing station. All right, before we even press anything, you'll notice that the shirred panel is gathering up the bottom of the skirt as well, which is exactly what we want. So we're going to pull the bodice up away from the skirt. And now we can stick a ham, rolled up towel, whatever. And we are going to press this seam allowance up towards the bodice. Being careful on the shirred panel just because, you will press like pleats into it. But we also want to hit it with steam so that that shirring does what it's supposed to do, and it'll shrink back up and gather in the back part of that skirt. And we can also hit the right side as well. Yeah, that shirring is pulling up the back of the skirt really nicely. Just checking to see if I needed to do any pressing. Now, I do see a spot here where my stay stitching did not get caught in my seam allowance. I am just going to go and, oh, those are basting stitches, I guess, not stay stitching. Unpick that, especially because I used contrast thread so that you guys could see. Okay. All right. Now go grab your lining, and I'm going to unpick this real quick because it's bothering me. Go get your lining, and I will meet you back here, and we're going to get that installed. Okay, so I've got my lining, we've got our bodice. I do want my straps down for this. They'll get secured later. Don't worry about those. And I'm going to take my lining and I'm going to turn it inside out here so that I can put my lining to the outer, the shell, the outer bodice, right sides together. Okay, might be kind of hard to tell. This is the wrong side is up. So I'm going to slide this over my bodice so that this is now right sides together. And I'm going to start pinning here at center front. Again, making sure that those straps are down. And then matching all of my princess seams, side seams, all of that. I am matching center back of my shirred panel, or yeah, to the center back of the knit panel. We'll be stretching that shirred panel and it will gather in the excess of that knit. We don't want to stretch the knit when we're sewing, but we will be stretching the shirred panel. So we'll sew with that up again. Okay, once that's pinned all the way around. Now, if you are doing the narrow straps, you really might want to mark exactly where your ends of your straps are, because we want that just to be really precise when it comes up around the edge. The wider straps, which I've got on this one, it's not as big of a deal. So when I come up with my 1/2 inch, I'll be, cutting across where I need to, just to make sure everything, because there's 2 different size straps, it fluctuates a little. So anyway, that you will want to mark that. You can go take a look at me sewing in the lining on the view A if you'd like to see what that looks like on marking those edges of the straps, just to make sure that we're hitting it very precisely when we're sewing. Okay, let's go over to the machine and we're going to sew this into place. All right, so I am just starting at one of the side seams here because we're going to be sewing all the way around the horn. And we're sewing at our 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm just going to be going and just making sure that my raw edges are lining up really nice and neatly. You also want to make sure that straps aren't getting caught up anywhere that they shouldn't be being caught up. And we're just pivoting there at those straps. And I'll do the same here at center front. Okay, when I get to this back shirred panel, remember we started that shirring at a 1/2 inch down from the top. So this should, just like we did when we were attaching it to the skirt, it should line up, but we are stretching just that shirred panel and sewing real close to that shirring. All right. So there we have it. Let's go back to the pressing station for the next step. All right, so we've got our bodice all lining all sewn to the outer edge of our bodice, and we're going to do some clipping into things so that we're going to attach this elastic. You also need to go ahead and cut your elastic per the chart and the pattern. So for my size, which is a size 10, I'm cutting a piece of elastic, this 1/4 inch elastic that is 9 7/8 long, okay? And we're going to attach that in just a second. So we're going to set that aside for just a minute, and then we're going to do some clipping into our bodice. First, here at center front, I'm going to clip straight down into, but not through that stitching. I'm going to trim my corners here at my straps so that turns without too much bulk. And then here at my underarm seam, I'm going to clip about every 1/2 inch to, but not through. It's okay if you cut your stay stitching. I don't really need to cut though once we get to this straighter back area. We don't need to cut anything along our sheared panel. Go to the other armhole. It's really just those curves. Because this is going to allow us to understitch here in just a minute, which we will do together. Okay. Once we've clipped, we're going to take our elastic and our dress, and we're going to go back to the sewing machine and sew in our elastic and then do some understitching. Okay, so I have set my elastic somewhere. There it is. All right, so we're going to be sewing our elastic in, and this is getting sewn into the top of this knit. This is the knit fabric. This is the shirred panel here, getting sewn into the top of this. I am using a zigzag stitch, and I am setting it at a 3 width and a 3 length. And I'm going to take one end of this and I'm lining it up with the edge of my knit fabric here. And we are going to be zigzagging this into place onto the seam allowance, and we're going to bump up the edge of the elastic pretty close to that line of stitching that we made. So I'm just going to get this started. And then I want to take the end of my elastic and I'm matching it up with the seam allowance on the other end. And now we are just going to kind of, not really stretching, I'm just kind of pulling it taut a little bit. This is stabilizing that area. And again, just making sure that the edge of my elastic is kind of riding right along the edge of that stitching that we did when we sewed the lining to the outer shell. Matching the edge of the elastic to the edge of that seam allowance. And then back stitching. So that's going to stable that really well. Once we hit that really nicely with steam, that's going to suck it back in a little bit and give it some nice stabilization. Okay, we are now going to do some understitching. So I'm taking my lining and I am pulling it away from the outer shell. And I want my seam allowance to go towards the lining. So we are going to start on this knit piece because we're going to use that same zigzag stitch. Now when we're understitching, we're sewing that seam allowance to our lining, but we're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch away from that previous stitch line. And as I go, I'm just gently pulling those 2 layers away. But I'm going to start on the knit here, and I'm starting with that same zigzag stitch, so that 3 length and 3 width. Get that started. And then I am just kind of pulling, and I want it to be flat, so I'm kind of pulling it taut this way as well, just through this section. But once I have finished with the knit fabric and the shirred panel, I am switching to a straight stitch with a just a 3mm length. And now we're going to, again, making sure that that seam allowance, and we've cut into the seam allowance in some places, is going towards the lining. So you may want to just keep peeking and checking. We are not going to be able to understitch all the way around because when we get close to the straps, we're just not going to be able to get in there, and that's fine. So we're going to go as far as we can. And then we will backstitch or break the line of stitching. Getting close. Probably about there. And then I'm going to pick it back up on the other side of the strap, again making sure that that seam allowance is in fact going towards the lining. Going down towards the V, and we'll break the stitching again. And when we get back to that knit, we'll stop. All right, let's go back to the pressing station. All right, once we've got everything understitched, we are going to do some pressing. And honestly, before I turn the lining inside to go over the bodice, I am going to prep it for when we sew things down here later. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to fold the lining, the bottom, the free edge of the lining, to the wrong side by that 1/2 inch. And we're just going to press it. This cotton voile that I'm using for the lining is, you can put a seam roll or something underneath there too if you're pressing stuff you don't want to press on the other side. But it's nice and crisp and it's pressing very nicely. This is going to make the next steps a little easier. Okay, now we can take that lining, turn it over our bodice, kind of tug those straps, and that will pull that little area out nicely. But the beauty of the understitching, I've got lots of little threads here at center front that I don't want. Trim those off. The beauty of the understitching is that it pulls that lining to the wrong side. It's magic. Trimming my threads. Okay. And I'm going to press this with the lining up because I want to make sure that that the right side is rolling to the back side a little bit. Again, that shirred panel is going to gather up on us, and that's exactly what we want it to do, especially when the steam hits that elastic. And we're just going to press all the way around the top edge of the neck, the armhole in the neck. Okay, once we've got that nice and pressed, it's time for boning. If you've decided to put boning into your bodice, now is the time to do that. I'm not putting it into this version, but you can go back and watch. It goes in the same way as it did for view A. Watch those steps for putting in the boning. Otherwise, I will see you back here for the next step. Okay, so whether or not, if you put your boning in, great. If not, great. The rest of these steps are all the same. We've got everything pressed down. We are now going to pin this in place and then slip stitch it in place. So I'm just putting my seam roll inside the dress. It just makes it a little easier to pin. But I'm going to go around, and I am, we folded our lining to the wrong side here, and I am just lining up that fold line to sit right above that waist seam line. And everything is pressed up nice and neatly. We'll come back around to the edge here with the nip. But I'm just going to pin, again, matching all of my seams. Okay, when we get to this shirred slash knit panel part, I am gonna match up. I've made a mark where center back is to that center back seam, and that's the only pin I'm gonna put there because we'll just stretch that as we are hand sewing. We will just stretch the fabric a little bit. Again, because we are hand sewing, it gives us a lot more wiggle room and leeway. All right, once that is all pinned in place, it is time to slip stitch this lining in place. So get a hand needle and some thread, and I'll meet you back here. All right, so I have my needle, hand needle threaded just with a single strand of thread. I've knotted it at the end, and I'm going to start here on this knit panel part so you can kind of see what's happening. I'm going to remove that. I'm just going to bury my knot. All right, so once we've buried our knot, I'm just going to be coming up, and I'm going to go through the fold here. And I'm going to make these larger. So that's probably like a little over 1/4 of an inch, which is fine. And then I'm going to pick up the seam allowance, but above that stitch line. So I am in the seam allowance. I am not stitching below that waist seam line. And then we're just going to pull our, oops. Pull my thread taut. And I'm just going to kind of pull things taut as I go, especially in this knit section. So again, grab, fold, grab some of that seam allowance, pull through. All right, so I'm just going to keep doing that same thing. I'll do it one more time. We're going to go up into the lining, through that fold, and then pick up some of that seam allowance. Just going to put a pin back here, so that it stops pulling out like it's doing. All right. So I'm just going to keep doing that all the way around the, you're not going to have to stretch once you hit the regular lining areas, but you will through the knit shirred area. So go ahead and do that all the way around the bodice, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, the final step, well, not the final step, almost final step. We still have to attach our straps, but we're going to work on the hem. And this is just the regular straight hem, the shorter hem. You can go back and look at the vented hem if you want to do that one, if you're doing the longer version. But we're going to take, I've got my wrong side up here, and I'm folding my hem allowance to the wrong side by 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to press this all the way around. And once you've gone all the way around the perimeter of the skirt, we are now going to fold it up 3/4 of an inch. and then press this all the way around. All right, once we've pressed that hem up, and you can definitely put pins in if you'd like, go to the machine, and from the right side, we're gonna top stitch that hem in place, making sure we're just catching the fold there on the underneath. So let me go do that, I'll be right back. All right, we have our hem sewn. And now the last step is going to be to sew our straps in place. So it is really important at this point for you to try the dress on, but you can go ahead and you can pin the straps in place, try the dress on, and then decide exactly where you want them, how short you want them, but it might be nice to go ahead and pin those in place first. If you're not sure where even to start pinning them in place, if you take a look at your center back bodice lining, and this could be for either 5A or 5B, it doesn't matter. There's a notch that's up here at the top, and it is roughly 2 inches away from the cut edge. So I can feel my seam allowance in there. So roughly 2 inches away, so we're about there. And this is if you've got the zippered back or not. It doesn't really matter, either or. Again, I'm feeling for that seam allowance, that cut edge, just right there. And then we could put those together just to make sure that's about right. And it is. So we can start by pinning our straps there. And now we finished off the edges of these straps, so that's all good. So we can go ahead and we can pin these in place to determine how long or short we want them. I always have to shorten my straps, so I'm gonna just kind of eyeball that. Make those the same. Also make sure that your strap is not twisted, like mine was trying to be just there. Okay, so go ahead and try it on, don't stab yourself, try on your dress, and then we are going to sew this in place, and we'll do it together, right at the top edge here, and then a little bit further down to just really secure this, this strap. So we're gonna sew it in 2 spots. So go ahead, try on your dress, measure to see that it is the correct length and everything else, and I'll meet you back here, or actually meet you at the sewing machine. All right, so I've decided where I want my straps to be. I have them pinned in place, and I'm just going to top stitch right here along the edge, just with a regular straight stitch. Well, maybe if I can get this all underneath here. Obviously, you're going to want to use maybe not contrasting thread. And then I'm going to back stitch. So I've got it sewn in right there at that spot. And then I'm going to pop down here and sew it in, I don't know, maybe just right beneath the first line of shirring. Obviously, if you are tall and you've had to really shorten your strap or make it longer, you may have to do closer up there, or maybe you just need one. And I wasn't stretching the fabric as I was doing this, and that will be okay. We will have enough stretch in the rest of it that'll be absolutely fine. So there we go. I've got my 2 lines of stitching right there, right there. I'll do that on the other side. Let me trim all of my threads, which look crazy when it's such a contrast. There. Okay. on both sides, and then your straps are secured. All right, once your straps are fixed and sewn down like so, you have got a finished Wayland dress. As always, if you have any questions at all about the process of this sew along, please leave them down below. I'm happy to answer those. And happy sewing. And there you have it, our 2 views of the Wayland dress. As a reminder, this pattern is for advanced beginners, but hopefully after watching this sew along, you feel confident in order to be able to tackle it, no matter your sewing level. This pattern is a collection pattern, meaning that you can get your hands on it at any time in the Cashmerette catalog. Also, this pattern does mix and match with the entire Cashmerette Upton line, meaning not only the Upton, which is also a collection pattern, but also the Ellington, which is a collection pattern, as well as 2 club patterns, the Mansfield and the Gilmore skirt. So there's really no woven dress you could imagine without all of those different mix and match details. As always, if you have any questions about any of the techniques or that were shown in this sew along, please leave those down below. I'm happy to answer those questions as soon as possible. I hope you've enjoyed this one, and until next time, happy sewing.